Okay, we are still on chapter 6, loops with the K. Horseman book, and we are moving into common loop algorithm. Excuse me. So the things that we can do in the loop, one of the things we can do is finding the total or sum. So we can read stuff and add them together, or go through a series of numbers and calculate the sum. So I'm not going to get there. We're just going to go through these. So as far as we have a double, we're going to read a double and we're going to add it to the total. That's the way we're going to calculate the sum. So what about the average? We want to do the sum first, and then we want to count to see how many numbers do we have. So the difference between this one and the previous one is we just put a counter on it, because if I want to calculate the average, I want to be sure that I have a count of how many you have. Then we have to think outside the box. So, okay, we are counting, we are getting the numbers from the user, and we're going to calculate the average. What's going to happen if the first thing that the user puts is not a double? Then it's not going to do anything over here. Then we're going to have a problem because my count is 0. And remember, that requires me to put this outside. Again, the way that I like to do it is I like to put this one right here first, check to be sure it has a double, and then put it right here after the count plus plus to be sure I'm checking it outside of them. So I'm going to write this in 2 lines, but on that way I can be sure if they don't put the first one. So in this case, if they don't put a double in the first one, I'm still doing the total, which is not a big, huge thing because I'm doing the 0 plus 0 anyway. But then the count is going to be plus plus. So we got to be careful with that one. So if my count is greater than 0, we're going to do this average. Otherwise, we are not going to do average. It's going to stay in 0. So remember, if I don't do anything, my average is going to be 0 already. So another thing that we can do is counting the matches. So we are looking for how many of the same number do I have, or how many of the same character do I have in a word. So I have a string, and remember that string.length is going to give me what's the length of my string. And then I'm going to get so I'm going to create a for loop. This is a good structure for for loop. Remember, you're going to start from somewhere, you're going to end somewhere, and you're going to go a step through it. That's the good that's a good thing for the for loop, that you have a starting point, ending point, and you're going to step through it. So we are going from the 0 less than, and this is a typical way we want to do it. We start with 0 less than the boundaries that we have. In this case, length of our string, and I++. So it's going to go through a character. So in this case, I am looking for space. So I'm going to create a character. I'm going to get it at the I. So the first one is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. As soon as I see a space, I'm going to add to my spaces. So this is my counting for spaces. So now I'm going to have how many spaces do I have in this case. So in here, I'm counting the spaces in a string. In this case, I'm looking for the words that has a length of 1, 2, or 3. So I am reading a word. Remember, we are reading word with next, and the has next is going to tell me if I have another word coming up, and if I don't, it's going to get out. So I'm going to read one word at a time, and then I am checking the lengths, and if their length is less than or equal 3, we're going to add 1 to it. Next chapter, we're going to learn about arrays and how we're going to put these things in an array, and we can process it over there. For now, because we don't have that, we just do this during the input. So what about if I just want to find the first match? So I have a string and I want to find something in my string. So in this case, let's say I'm looking for a question mark. So we're going to create a Boolean. Of course, again, you can do this loop different ways. You can have your Boolean, and as far as it's not found and the position is a less than length, you're going to get the character. If the character is a space, so I guess we're looking for the first space. As soon as you see a first space, you're going to set the found equal true. Otherwise, you add the position and you're going to keep going. So we put it the question mark for why? Because when we want to start, it's not going to, it has to check for the space. So we have an and over here. So the found is false, not false is true. And the position we start with 0. So it's going to keep going up here. And as soon as it reaches the length of my string, we're going to stop. So for the searching, you're going to keep looking until you find it. And a common saying is what? It's always the last place that you look. Of course, it's the last place that I look, because after I found it, I'm not going to look anymore. That's why it's last place that I look. So that's the idea of you look at the item until you find it. Common loop algorithm, prompting until a match is found. So we're going to be input validation. We are checking for valid. If it's not valid, we're going to keep going. Again, we can do this different way. So my favorite way, again, is to put this one outside my loop and take this one as part of my while loop with a not at the beginning. So I'm going to ask enter the value. I'm going to read a double, and I'm going to say while not this statement. I'm going to just put a not right there, and then I'm going to print invalid input. So one thing that you got to remember, we talked about the scope of the variables, that if you have variables that inside of this while loop, they are not available outside. So if you declare something in here, it's not going to be available outside. Another thing that we can do is finding the maximum and minimum, the largest or smallest one that we want to do. So one way of doing it is we're going to read something and we're going to set the first one to our maximum. And then we're going to compare the future one to my maximum. If the next number or the following numbers are greater than my maximum, I'm going to set my maximum to double. So I'm looking for a larger number. The first number is 5. My maximum is 5. Then I read 2. No, it's not greater than 5. Then I read 8. Now 8 becomes my maximum. And the reverse is going to work for the minimum. So I'm going to put my minimum to what I read. My first number is going to be minimum. Of course, if I want to put a check on this one, I want to check it to be sure it has next. And then as soon as I read a number, I'm going to compare it. So if this number is smaller than my minimum, then I'm going to set my minimum to that number. And these are some things that you might not think about it this way. You just do it one time, two times, and then you know how to do it. So for these two to work, the user has to have at least one input. So if they don't put the first one correctly, then I don't have nothing and it's not going to work. And this is a side note from your book that if we want to find the tallest person in the bus, the first person comes in, we're going to put that one as the tallest, and the next one, if it's taller than that one, we're going to tag that one, and if it's not, then we move on to the next one. So what about if we are looking for the ones next to each other? So if I'm looking for things next to each other, in this case, I want to be sure, I want to check to see if I have repeated numbers next to each other. So to do that, I'm going to read numbers as we go through. And then when I have my first one and I want to go read the next one, I'm going to set my previous to the current and I'm going to read my current. So now I have two numbers, the previous and current. In this case, I have read 1 and 7. Then I go through it and I'm going to say, if they are equal, what I'm going to do, I am going to just print out that they are duplicate. So if I don't go through this if statement, it goes back up. It's going to put my current number, which is 7, in the previous. We're going to read the next one, which is 2. So I'm comparing 7 with 2. Are they equal? No. We're going to go back up. Now my 2 becomes previous. My 9 becomes current. Is 2 equal 9? No. We're just going to keep going. And then this 9 right here becomes my previous. I'm going to read another number, which is 9. I'm comparing them together. And now I have them equal. So my current is equal to the previous one. Then I'm going to write duplicate, find. All right, so this is going to end this section. So we are going to be working on this. Again, have a pen and a paper ready, write it down. Try to not to use IDE as much as possible. Again, we're trying to separate your coding versus thinking. So what total is computed when no user input is provided in the algorithm in section. So the idea of this one is not to put the code in your IDE and let the IDE think. We want you to think about it. So go over it without compiling the code. Just think about what's going to happen. Then you can, of course, test your answer. How do you compute the total of all positive inputs? What are the values of position and CH when a no match is found in section 6.7.3? What is wrong with the following loop for finding the position of the first space in the string? So we have a string, we want to find the first string, we are setting the found equal false, we are using the for loop, my favorite loop. I would use for loop for anything that I can. My first choice for the loop would be for loop. If I cannot do the for loop, then I go do while loop. So in this case, I'm setting the position to 0. I am looking for not found and position less than a string. and position plus plus, we're getting a character at the position, and then we're going to check it to see if that character is true. So what is wrong with this code? How do you find a position of the last space in the string? So this one was, we were doing it from the beginning to go to the end. Now we want to go from the end to beginning to find the last space, not the first one. What happens with the algorithm section 676 when no input is provided at all? How can we fix that? So these are the things that we have to start thinking. What's going to happen this way? What's going to happen this way? What about if the user for the first entry put wrong? Because some of these things, we are assuming the first number is correct. So we have to think about these things and resolve it. I'm going to stop here for now.